Here's the ash log that I picked up at the mill, and I cut the end off to cut it to length. Here I cut the end of the ash log off. I took 1 foot in length, so I have a 7-foot log on the truck. I wanted an idea of what the weight would be, so you can see here the fibers and how flexible they are. This is what the characteristics of that ash is going to give us. Okay, now I weighed this end of the log, and it weighs 30 pounds plus a little, and the log here is 7 foot, so at 7 foot times 30, that gives us 210 pounds. Here we're looking at the end of the ash log, and if you're looking closely at this, here you can see the growth rings, and you see this wider strip. This is the late growth, and this real thin area here is the early spring growth, and this is the one that gets crunched when you hammer on it, and it'll separate at these layers. Now if you look at some of this area, you see how close these rings are. Now when we make these strips, we split each one of these in half, and it will give you a real smooth finish on the split side. To begin, we want to remove the bark, and I use an axe. You see here, I'm using a 10-pound sledge. So we begin with ponding. How do you know when you ponded enough? You'll hear a sound difference. The other thing is you'll see the bark or the wood start to separate like this. And this is where I pounded. What I'm going to do here is split this log into staves like I do for making bows. But this is again ash. I'm using wedges. You see the 2 wedges here. One is a little bit thinner than the other. I'll start with the thin wedge and then continue the split with the more blunt one. And if you start with where it's already cracking, you can see here, making an X. We'll follow along one of those. That's the way it naturally wants to split. And we always split the log in halves. And the reason for doing that is it'll have a tendency to run a straighter split down the log. Then you take this half and we run that and making this into quarters. But what I'm doing is I'm riving this log, splitting it into staves like I did my bow staves in a previous video. But for this one, we need to get those split down. It'll make the hammering of the weavers much easier. We can concentrate our hammer blows into a small area. Okay, now I have this quartered. I want to take each quarter and split those 3 more times. And that will give us a narrow piece, about 2 inches, and that's what we're going to work with. Here you can see I took the billet through my planer and I got the size of the width all even. And this is just one of those wedges that made all these. And from this one I've already been taking it down. And you can see these hoops here. These have already been removed and coiled. These would be ready to use. You just soak them before you start using them. They're very pliable. So let me show you how I'm removing the individual pieces off of this billet. Now this is a lot of work, but I find this to be the easiest method. And all the energy goes into crushing that inner layer. Now I'm not going to try to keep pounding on this area to release these. I'm just going to really be concerned with removing the top one. So I'll pound the entire area. The following layers will release easier because a lot of it is crushed. These will be scraped on both sides to smooth off that spring growth. But when you split one down the center, it will leave that very smooth, silky smooth. And that smooth side is what you would leave to the outside of the basket. As you remove strips, you can see here they're going to get easier each time because that shock wave is going through the whole billet here and it's separating already. So that's not even being concentrated on yet, and that was from removing the top 3 at one time. So each pounding, the falling row will get easier to remove. What I'm showing you here is 2 different growth rings, and you can see how thick this one is compared to this one. This one is pliable, and that's about the thickness that we want. This one here we're going to split down the center, and let me show you the method that I do for that. box cutter works real good. I'm going to use the small blade on my knife. And what I'm going to do is score this, making a cut. And I want this to be as close as I can to the midpoint, middle of the width. Once you have that midpoint, then I'm going to bend this. I'm going to bend it at that point. And force this open. Okay, sometimes I'll use my knife blade to get in there. Okay, not quite dead center, but we're pretty close. Now let me show you the method of splitting this all the way. Okay, once you have this started, one side's going to be a little bit thicker than the other. And what I do is, since I'm right-handed, I bend the thicker side more, and I use my knees for support. And by bending the thicker side, it'll keep this side from running off, the thinner side. And I'm using my knee to support this. And you want to take your time doing this because of the amount of work that it took to get to this stage. You don't want to blow it right here. Areas like this gives you trouble because it has indentation and bumps, but it can pull through it. After you make the split, you cut the diameter in half, and one side is going to be real smooth. That's the split side, and this is the sapwood side. This side will be scraped smooth, and this side just comes out smooth.